I still remember the face of my friend dying in front of my eyes. Would that look be a resentment against me, an anger, or a sadness? I do not know the answer. I would never know forever. Sometimes the memory of that day portrays like a movie scene in my head, regardless of my will, and it feels like it is getting clearer as days go by. My psychiatrist told me that this was because of the shock, and he said he would conduct a hypnotherapy to erase my memory. In my unconscious, I imagine going back to that day to save my friend. However, despite repeating hundreds of times, I could not save him. It happened 8 years ago. This is a story of Ewan, a friend of mine who fell into a cult. He had believed in religion for a long time, but there was something off about it. Rumors say that people worship a very large snake as a god. I told him to not lie, but Ewan's face looked serious. He said everything went well after believing in that religion. One day, I couldn't resist his incessant invitation, so I followed him once. He was my best friend for 10 years, so I couldn't reject. What was the name of the religion? I couldn't remember, but one thing I do remember is that the name was not in modern language. I was shocked as soon as I entered the religion auditorium. Everyone was wearing a snake-faced mask with their tongues sticking out. Their tongues were all split in the middle like a snake. But that day happened to be the day of an important ritual, which was the day of worship to the snake god. The cult leader came into the auditorium, and the believers frantically made the sound of snakes. I was shocked and got horrified to see Ewan was also hissing like crazy. A moment went by, and the believers gave something to the leader. Someone gave a snake-shaped gold. Someone else gave huge bundles of money, and someone even brought a deer that they had caught themselves. When it was Ewan's turn, I was confused because his hands were empty. However, when the leader stood in front of him, Ewan pushed me towards the leader. Full of shock and anger, I asked him what on earth he was doing. The leader, with an excited look, said to me, "Oh, such a precious gift. Do you also agree with being offered as a sacrifice to the snake god?" I cried out, "Never." Ewan started to persuade me. "You will get a huge reward if you give a part of your body to the snake god. Let's cut a little bit off of your thigh. I did it too." Ewan showed me his thigh, and his thighs were indeed cut. I shouted out, "Never." The leader suddenly became cold and stared at Ewan. He said quietly, "Then, Mr. Ewan does not have a sacrifice to offer today." Ewan's face became cold, and he started to tremble. He knelt down and begged me for permission. I did not want to do it, so I flatly refused. Then the leader shouted, "The snake god commands you to be punished." Then he dragged Ewan to take him somewhere. I followed him, yelling to let him go, but I couldn't help him because the believers stopped me. Ewan screamed and grappled, yet they did not let him go. They took him somewhere far away and reached a huge cage. And inside the cage, there was a large snake coiled up that seemed to be more than 5 meters long. Ewan screamed, but the believers threw Ewan into the cage. In shock, I asked what they were doing, to which the leader replied, "The snake god will decide whether to punish him or to forgive him. We shall see his will." Soon after, the huge snake started to wind round Ewan's body. He screamed for help, and his eyes met mine. He looked at me and opened his mouth as if he was trying to tell me, but he couldn't speak. The snake was around his body completely, and I could hear a sound like crackling bones. I cried out and screamed, but I was kicked out by the believers. In such shock and horror, I called the police. The police arrived, but they were stopped by the leader and his believers. It took a while for the police to arrest them. When the police tried to find Iwan, he was nowhere to be found. However, the body of the snake was quite swollen. After the investigation, the police confirmed that Iwan was eaten by the snake. The leader and his believers were put in jail. It turned out that the leader actually fed not only Iwan, but also numerous people to the snake. I still cannot forget the eyes of dying Iwan, and I still have nightmares. In my nightmare, it is not Iwan, but me being winded up to death by the snake, and the feeling is so vivid as if it were real. Even today, my bed was soaked with my sweat, and the disgusting smell I felt in my dreams remained in my nose. When will this nightmare be over?